The sublevels of the station did not smell like democracy or elections. They smelled of recycled coolant, fried synthetic spices, and the copper tang of desperation. Sarah Voss moved through the crushing density of the deep market with a fluidity that made the crowd seem like water parting around a stone. She had reattached her armor plating, though the seal on her left flank was jury-rigged with thermal tape and hope. Jonah Cade followed in her wake, clutching the pocket of his jacket where the data shard burned a phantom hole against his ribs. He felt painfully conspicuous. In the upper levels, he was a signals analyst, a man who lived in the invisible architecture of code and encryption. Here, among the smugglers, gene hackers, and illegal mod surgeons, he was soft prey. "Stay close," Sarah had said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't look at anyone longer than 2 seconds. And for the love of the void, do not apologize if someone bumps into you." She stopped abruptly in front of a stall draped in heavy, oil-stained tarps. The vendor was a cyborg whose face was 60% chrome, inspecting a pile of what looked like fossilized vertebrae that emitted a low, thrumming hum. "We need transport," Sarah told the vendor. "Fast, quiet, no flight logs." The cyborg didn't look up. He rotated a vertebrae in his metal fingers. "The price of silence has gone up. Voss, the election cycle makes the patrols jumpy. They are shooting unregistered skiffs on sight." "I have credits," Jonah interjected, stepping forward. Sarah threw an arm across his chest, slamming him back against a bulkhead. The motion was so fast Jonah didn't process it until the wind was knocked out of him. The cyborg laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "Fresh meat," the vendor rasped. "He has an honest face. Terrible survival trait." Sarah glared at Jonah, her amber eyes narrowing. "Silence," she hissed. Then she turned back to the vendor. "He is cargo, and I am paying with Helix Dominion script. Verified tokens." The cyborg's mechanical eye whirred, focusing on her. "That is dangerous currency, Voss, but it spends." They secured passage on a freighter that looked less like a ship and more like a collection of welded mistakes flying in formation. The captain was a mute Talaran who communicated solely through bioluminescent flashes from his throat sac, pointing them toward a cramped airlock that hissed violently when it cycled. As the ship shuddered, detaching from the station's rusted underbelly, Jonah slumped onto a crate of pressurized canisters. The space was barely large enough for 2 people, filled with the smell of stale oxygen and hydraulic fluid. "How much did that cost you?" Jonah asked, rubbing his chest where she had checked him. 70% of my current liquidity," Sarah said, checking the power levels on her gauntlets. She sat opposite him, her long legs folded awkwardly in the tight space. "And do not think you are absolved of the debt." "I was trying to help," Jonah said. "I have accounts. I could have transferred funds." Sarah let out a short, harsh laugh. "Transfers leave trails. Trails lead to kill teams. Your accounts are likely frozen or flagged by now. Analyst, you have nothing but that shard and the air in your lungs. And right now, both are expensive." She leaned her head back against the hull, closing her eyes. The bioluminescent markings on her neck were dim now, a dull violet pulse that matched the rhythm of the ship's engines. Jonah watched her, fascinatingly terrified. She was a weapon that had decided for no logical reason to become a shield. "Why?" he asked quietly. She didn't open her eyes. "Why what?" "Why didn't you turn me in? You said the contract was double booked, but you could have just walked away. Let the assassins handle it." Sarah opened one eye. It was reptilian and strikingly intelligent. "I do not like being used as a distraction," she said. "The client lied. They sent a kill team to clean up the mess. which meant they expected me to die alongside you. I take that personally. Is that the only reason? She looked at him, her expression hardening. It is the only one that matters. The ship lurched violently as the main thrusters kicked in, pushing them away from the station's gravity well. A red warning light began to strobe in the ceiling, and the air pressure dropped sharply. "Oxygen mask," Sarah ordered, grabbing a hanging mask from the wall and tossing it to him before securing her own. The sudden drop in pressure made Jonah's ears pop painfully. The ship groaned, metal stressing against the sudden acceleration. They were thrown forward by a fluctuation in the inertial dampeners. Jonah slid off the crate, colliding with Sarah's armored knees. He scrambled to right himself, his hand accidentally brushing the exposed skin of her midriff where the armor was missing. Her skin was hot, feverishly so. She flinched, sucking in a sharp breath through the mask. "Sorry," Jonah mumbled, the word muffled by the plastic cup over his mouth. Sarah did not push him away. The cramped quarters meant their legs remained tangled as the ship stabilized. She stared at him, the mask hiding her lower face, but her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. For a moment, the mercenary veneer cracked. She looked young, exhausted, and terrifyingly alive. "Just breathe," she said, her voice tinny through the comms. "Focus on the intake. 1, 2. Jonah nodded, forcing his lungs to obey. He was conscious of every point of contact between them, his shoulder against her shin, his hand resting on the floor inches from her boot. The air felt charged, thick with static and the scent of ozone. When the red light finally ceased its strobing and the pressure equalized, they pulled the masks off. The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah shifted, pulling her legs back, reclaiming her space with practiced indifference. "So," she said, clearing her throat, "who are we running from?" Specifically, Jonah sat up, adjusting his jacket. He decided to trust her. He had to. "The Concordat." Sarah frowned. "The political alliance? That is half the Senate. And the Helix Dominion," Jonah added. "They are working together. The Concordat creates the crisis, border skirmishes, trade embargoes, and the Helix Dominion steps in with the solution: private security, emergency governance protocols. They profit from the chaos they manufacture." Sarah looked down at her hands. Her gloves were scuffed, the knuckles scarred. "The Helix Dominion," she repeated softly. "They are the ones who hold the primary contracts for my guild." Jonah watched her carefully. "Did you know?" "I knew the wars were frequent," she said, her voice tight. "I knew that every time a peace treaty was signed, a new conflict erupted in a resource-rich sector 3 months later. But I thought she trailed off, her jaw clenching. I told myself I was a soldier, that I fought for stability. You were a tool," Jonah said, not unkindly, "like the rest of us." Her head snapped up, fire in her eyes. "I am not a tool. I am a free agent. I choose my contracts. Do you?" Jonah challenged gently. "Or do they just give you a menu of options that all lead to the same outcome?" Sarah opened her mouth to retort, but the ship gave a strange, sickening lurch, not physical, but temporal. The air inside the cabin shimmered like heat haze over asphalt. The sound of the engine stretched into a low, guttural moan that seemed to take 1,000 years to finish. "What is that?" Jonah asked, grabbing the wall as vertigo spun the room. "Quantum shear," Sarah said, but her voice was out of sync with her lips. "We are passing through a storm field. The smugglers used them to hide from scanners." The visual distortion intensified. The rusted walls of the ship seemed to dissolve into translucent mist. Jonah looked at Sarah, and for a heartbeat, he didn't see the armored mercenary in the dark, cramped hold. He saw her standing in sunlight. It was vivid and undeniable. She was wearing loose, civilian linen, her armor gone. She was laughing, her head thrown back, standing on the terrace of a building overlooking a turquoise sea. And he was there too. He knew it because he was the one she was laughing at. He felt the phantom sensation of her hand in his, warm and calloused. He felt a profound, settled peace that implied years of history, decades of survival. Then, with a snap like a breaking branch, the vision collapsed. They were back in the dark, smelling the stale air. Jonah was gasping, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He looked at Sarah. She was pale, her skin markings rippling in erratic, confused patterns of blue and gray. "Did you see it?" Jonah whispered. Sarah turned away, adjusting a strap on her gauntlet with shaking fingers. "Temporal echo," she said, her voice rough. "Possibility wave. It means nothing. The brain tries to make sense of the quantum noise." "It felt real," Jonah said. "It wasn't," she snapped too quickly. "It was a glitch in the probability matrix. Do not read into it. Human." She refused to look at him for the next 4 hours of the flight. They landed on the moon of Aridus under the cover of a dust storm. The landscape was a monochromatic nightmare of beige and rust, the wind howling like a dying animal. The smuggler ship kicked them out at the edge of a jagged settlement built into the skeletons of old mining rigs. "My contact is in Sector 4, Jonah shouted over the wind, pulling his scarf up to cover his nose. "Her name is Ilara. She's a decoder. She can break the second layer on the shard." Sarah took point, her body angled into the wind, her hand hovering near the pulse pistol on her hip. The settlement was dark, the windows shuttered against the storm. It felt abandoned, but Sarah knew better. She tracked heat signatures in the doorways, the subtle shift of shadows. They reached the coordinates, a small, prefabricated HAB unit half buried in a drift of red sand. The door was unlocked. "Bad sign," Sarah muttered. She kicked the door open, weapon raised. Jonah followed, dread pooling in his stomach. Inside, the air was still and cold. Ilara was sitting in her chair, facing the main console. She looked peaceful, her head resting on the desk. It was a clean job. No blood, just a small blackened burn mark at the base of her skull. "Neuroscorch," Sarah said, lowering her weapon. "Efficient, expensive." Jonah rushed to the body, checking for a pulse he knew wouldn't be there. "They knew," he said, his voice trembling. "How did they know she was the contact?" "Algorithm," Sarah said, scanning the room for traps. "If they know who you are, they know who you know. They pruned the branches before you could climb them." Jonah stared at the dead woman. She had been a friend, not a close one, but someone who had taught him how to splice data feeds. She had a cat. She liked ancient Earth jazz. Now she was just geometry on a desk. "We have to go," Sarah said. "This is a kill box." As she turned to the door, she stumbled. It wasn't a trip. Her legs simply folded under her. She hit the floor hard, a guttural sound of pain tearing from her throat. "Sarah." Jonah was at her side in an instant. She was convulsing, her back arching as if an invisible current was running through her spine. Her skin markings were flashing a violent, warning red kill switch. She gasped, teeth gritted so hard Jonah thought they might shatter. They triggered the warning pulse. "What do I do?" Jonah shouted, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch. "Med pack," she wheezed. "My belt. Blue injector. Stabilizes. The nervous system." Jonah fumbled with the pouches on her belt, his fingers slippery with sweat. He found the injector, a cylindrical device with a menacing needle. He jammed it against her neck, pressing the trigger. The hiss of the pneumatic delivery was loud in the small room. Sarah slumped forward, the convulsions easing into tremors. She took jagged, wet breaths. They are tracking the biosignal, she whispered. You need to run. Leave me. No, Jonah said. Do not be an idiot. She snarled, grabbing his collar with surprising strength. Her eyes were unfocused, swimming with pain. I am compromised. If I fail to check in within the hour, the next pulse will liquefy my motor cortex. I am dead weight. I am not leaving you, Jonah said, his voice steady. He grabbed her wrists, pulling her hands away from his collar. Look at me. We are partners. That was the deal. He moved behind her, sliding his arms under her shoulders to haul her up. She was heavy, dense with muscle and armor, but he leveraged his weight, grunting with effort. She tried to push him away, but her limbs were uncooperative. Stop fighting me, Jonah said, bracing her against his chest. The proximity was overwhelming. He could feel the heat radiating off her back. She smelled of rain and hot metal. Sarah stopped struggling, her head falling back against his shoulder. You are a stubborn fool, she murmured. Jonah guided her to a crate, helping her sit. He knelt in front of her, his hands resting on her knees to steady her. She looked at him, her defenses stripped away by pain. The bioluminescence on her skin had faded to a soft, pulsing peach color, a sign of exhaustion he was learning to recognize. He reached up, hesitating, then placed a hand on her cheek. Her skin was incredibly soft, a stark contrast to the hard lines of her armor. We're going to fix this, he said. Sarah leaned into his touch, an instinctive, desperate motion she seemed unable to stop. Her eyes searched his face, confused by the lack of deceit. She grabbed his wrist, her fingers tight. Jonah, she said. It was the first time she had used his name without a sneer. The air in the room felt suddenly too small. The danger outside, the storm, the assassins, the war, seemed to recede, leaving only the two of them in the dim light of a dead woman's apartment. Jonah felt a pull, magnetic and terrifying, drawing him toward her. He looked at her lips, slightly parted, and saw the same desire mirrored in her eyes. It was dangerous. It was inconvenient. It was real. He leaned in, just an inch. Her breath hitched. Then the console on the desk beeped. The sound shattered the moment. They sprang apart, breathless and flushed. Jonah scrambled to the desk, grateful for the distraction to hide the shaking of his hands. The shard, he said, his voice cracking slightly. It's reacting to the console. He plugged the data shard into Alara's terminal. The screen flooded with cascading code, red and angry. Then, the text vanished, replaced by a single biometric prompt. Identity verification required, species designation, VOS, subtype, alphas. Jonah stared at the screen. It's not asking for a password, he said. It's asking for you. Sarah pulled herself up, using the desk for support. She looked at the prompt, her face draining of color. That is impossible. This data is from a Senate committee. Why would it be keyed to my genetic markers? Place your hand on the scanner, Jonah said. She hesitated, fear warring with curiosity. Slowly, she placed her palm on the interface. The scanner swept a beam of green light over her skin. Access granted. The files unlocked. Maps, troop movements, financial transfers. And at the center of it all, a personnel file. Not for a politician, but for a project. Project Chimera. Jonah scrolled through the text. Sarah, this says you weren't hired by the Helix Dominion. It says you were manufactured by them. Before she could process the words, the door to the HAB unit exploded inward. Jonah was thrown back by the concussive force. Dust and debris filled the room. Through the haze, a figure stepped in. He was massive, a towering slab of alien muscle encased in black, matte armor. He wore the same guild crest as Sarah, but his face was scarred, his grin cruel. "Rix," Sarah whispered, steadying herself against the wall. "So, the prototype finally learns to read." Rix rumbled. His voice sounded like rocks tumbling in a deep cave. "You look terrible, Voss. That kill switch stings, doesn't it?" "Who are you?" Jonah shouted, scrambling to his feet, shielding Sarah despite having no weapon. "I am what she was supposed to be," Rix said, leveling a heavy plasma cannon at them. "Obedient. The Helix Dominion is tired of your glitches. Sarah, you have too much personality. They sent me to retrieve their property." He didn't wait for a response. He fired. Jonah tackled Sarah, rolling them behind a heavy plasteel overturned table just as the plasma bolt vaporized the spot where they had been standing. "Move!" Sarah yelled, adrenaline overriding the pain. They scrambled out the back exit, tumbling into the storm. Rick smashed through the wall behind them like a juggernaut. They ran toward the relic canyon, a jagged tear in the moon's crust where ancient, colossal machines lay half buried in the rock. The wind screamed, blinding them with sand. "Into the fissure," Sayera commanded, pulling Jonah down a steep slope. They slid down the shale, landing in the shadow of a massive, dormant engine block the size of a cathedral. Rix was firing from the ridge, bolts of plasma searing the air above their heads. Sayera was bleeding from a shrapnel cut on her arm. As a drop of her violet blood hit the ancient metal of the machine, a low, resonant hum began to vibrate through the ground. "The canyon," Jonah yelled over the noise. "It's waking up!" The machines were reacting to her. Lights flickered on under centuries of dust. A mechanical arm, vast and rusted, groaned and shifted, creating a barrier between them and Rix. "He cannot follow us through the active zone," Sarah said, clutching her arm. "The relic field disrupts targeting sensors." They huddled in a crevice beneath the humming machine. Rix shouted something from the ridge, a threat lost to the wind, but he did not descend. Sarah slumped against the cold stone. She looked at the data pad Jonah had grabbed from the desk. The file on Project Chimera was still open. "Built," she whispered, "not born. My memories of home, the orphanage, the training academy, implants," Jonah said softly. "Narrative overlays." She looked at him, her eyes brimming with a devastation so profound it hurt to witness. "I do not know what is real. If my past is a lie, then who am I?" Jonah took her hand, the hand that had saved him, the hand that had hesitated on the trigger. "You are the person who refused to kill me," he said fiercely. "You are the person who feels pain and anger and whatever that was back in the room. They might have built the hardware, Sayera, but you wrote the software. You are choosing who you are. Right now." Sarah looked down at her wrist, where the Mercenary Guild's contract token was embedded in her gauntlet. It was pulsing with a request for status, a command to surrender. She reached for a jagged shard of metal on the ground. "What are you doing?" Jonah asked. "Resigning," she said. She jammed the metal shard into the token, twisting it violently. Sparks showered down, burning her skin, but she didn't flinch. With a sickening crunch, the token shattered. The link was severed. The silence that followed was absolute. "You just declared war on your own guild," Jonah said, awe in his voice. "No," Sarah said, standing up. She looked at the glowing machines around them, then at Jonah. Her expression was no longer confused. It was resolved. "I just declared war on my manufacturers." She offered him a hand, her grip strong, the tremor gone. "Come, human. We have a propaganda cycle to break." The descent into the station's underbelly was not a journey of distance, but of atmosphere. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of recycled ozone, frying oil, and the copper tang of unauthorized circuitry. Here, the sleek, sanitized aesthetics of the upper Senate levels gave way to the chaotic sprawl of the deep market. A labyrinth of rusted catwalks and neon-drenched stalls where legality was a myth and survival was the only currency. Jonah Cade kept his head down, clutching the lapels of his jacket as if the fabric could shield him from the sensory assault. Drones buzzed overhead like agitated insects, but these weren't the sleek surveillance units of the Concordat. They were cobbled together monstrosities of wire and mismatched plating, broadcasting jagged rhythms of black market advertisements. "Stay in my shadow," Sarah Voss murmured, her voice a low vibration that cut through the cacophony. "And do not make eye contact. In this sector, looking at someone is considered an invitation to either a transaction or a duel." Jonah adjusted his pace to match hers. Sarah moved with a predatory grace that cleared a path through the throngs of scavengers, gene hackers, and off-duty void miners. She had reattached her armor, but the scorch marks on her left pauldron were a stark reminder of their escape. To the casual observer, she was just another mercenary in a place teeming with them. But Jonah noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her hand hovered millimeters from the pulse pistol at her hip. They stopped before a sprawling stall draped in iridescent polymer sheets. The sign above it flickered in 4 different languages, promising rare isotopes and linguistic implants. The proprietor was a Telleran, a squat, amphibious humanoid surrounded by tanks of bubbling fluid and shelves of metallic fragments that seemed to whisper in a frequency just on the edge of hearing. "I need passage off station," Sarah said, leaning over the counter. Her amber eyes were hard, unblinking, low profile, no flight logs, and I need it within the hour. The Tellaran blinked slowly, his throat sac inflating with a wet, croaking sound. "The blockades are tightening. Mercenary. The Senate has locked down the transit corridors. The price for a ghost run has tripled since the morning cycle." Jonah stepped forward, the analyst in him overriding his survival instinct. "I can pay," he said, his voice sounding too clean, too polite for the grime of the market. "I have access to encrypted credit reserves." The Tellaran shifted his gaze to Jonah, his slit-pupilled eyes widening. He let out a rasping noise that might have been a laugh. "Credits leave trails, soft skin, and you have the look of a man who is being hunted by people who can track a single credit across the sector." Sarah shoved Jonah back with a sharp, rigid arm across his chest. "Silence," she hissed, not looking at him. She turned back to the merchant. "He is cargo. I am the client." She reached into a pouch on her belt and withdrew a heavy hexagonal coin stamped with the emblem of the Helix Dominion. It glowed with a faint internal light, verified currency of the highest order, usually reserved for military contractors. The Tellaran's eyes narrowed. "That is blood money." "Voss, it spends the same," Sarah said, slamming the coin onto the counter. "Do you have a ship, or do I need to find someone less inquisitive?" The merchant swiped the coin with a webbed hand. "Hangar Bay 42, the Rust Bucket. Captain Halloway owes me a favor. He leaves in 20 minutes. As they turned away, moving back into the crush of the crowd, Jonah rubbed his chest where she had struck him. "You didn't have to shove me," he muttered. "I was just trying to help." Sarah cast a glance over her shoulder, her expression a mix of annoyance and something that looked suspiciously like amusement. "You have an honest face. Jonah, in a place like this, an honest face is a target. It screams that you have something to lose." "And you don't?" Jonah challenged, skipping a step to avoid a puddle of glowing hydraulic fluid. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She adjusted the seal on her gauntlet, her gaze fixed on the middle distance.
No ringing? Okay.
I paid because I am responsible for the mission, she said finally. You are the package. The package does not pay for its own delivery. Halfway to the hangar, she stopped at a kiosk selling nutrient bars and grabbed two, tossing one to Jonah. Put it on my tab, she told the vendor, flashing a Mercenary guild sign that made the man nod and look away quickly. She smirked at Jonah as they walked on. Consider it a loan, with interest. The rust bucket lived up to its name. It was a freighter that seemed to be held together by weld scars and prayer, shaped like a brick with thrusters. Captain Halloway was a human with a cybernetic jaw and a distinct lack of patience. He pointed them toward a cargo hold near the aft engines without a word, taking Sarah's authorization code and sealing the airlock behind them. The hold was a cramped metal box filled with crates of agricultural machinery parts. There were no seats, only jump straps bolted to the wall. The air smelled of stale, recycled oxygen and grease. Get comfortable, Sarah said, sliding down the wall to sit on the floor, her long legs stretching out to nearly touch the opposite bulkhead. It is a 6-hour burn to the jump point. Jonah sat opposite her, the metal floor cold through his trousers. The ship shuddered violently as the main thrusters ignited, the roar vibrating through his teeth. As they broke the station's gravity well, the artificial gravity in the hold fluctuated, leaving his stomach somewhere near his throat. So, Jonah said, trying to distract himself from the nausea. The Concordat. Sarah closed her eyes, resting her head against the vibrating wall. The political alliance. Half the Senate is in their pocket. It is more than that, Jonah said, leaning forward. He felt the familiar itch of puzzle solving, the need to organize chaos into data. The Concordat is the political face. But the muscle, the funding? That is the Helix Dominion. Sarah's eyes opened. The vertical pupils contracted. The Helix Dominion is a corporate empire. They manufacture weapons, medical tech, heavy industry. They profit from emergency governance, Jonah corrected. He pulled the data shard from his pocket, turning it over in his fingers. The shard pulsed with a faint blue rhythm. I found the financial trails. Every time there is a border skirmish, the Helix Dominion gets a no-bid contract to secure the sector. Every time there is a plague scare, they get the exclusive rights to the vaccine. And now, Sarah asked quietly, now they are staging a war, Jonah said. A real one. The border conflict they are fabricating, it isn't just for contracts. They want the relic, the Astra Loom. If they control that, they don't need to manufacture crises anymore. They can just rewrite reality to suit their quarterly projections. Sarah looked down at her hands. They were encased in armored gauntlets, scratching the metal plating of her thigh. My guild, she said, her voice tight. We have been taking more contracts from Helix shell companies lately. Pacification missions, asset retrieval. She let out a bitter, sharp exhale. I told myself I was a soldier, that I was keeping the peace. But if what you say is true, you were being used, Jonah said gently. We both were. I was just an analyst finding patterns they didn't want found. You were the instrument they used to enforce the silence.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Sarah's jaw tightened. Her pride was a physical thing, a hardened shell that protected her more than the armor did. To be a weapon is one thing, she murmured. A weapon has purpose, but to be a tool, to be curated like a piece of equipment. She didn't finish the thought. The ship gave a violent lurch, throwing them both sideways. The ambient lighting in the hold flickered and died, replaced by the strobing red of emergency klaxons. Pressure drop, Sarah shouted over the alarm. Masks! She lunged for a panel on the wall, ripping it open to reveal two yellow oxygen masks connected to a central tank. She tossed one to Jonah and shoved the other over her face just as the air was sucked out of the room with a terrifying hiss. Jonah jammed the mask over his nose and mouth, his ears popping painfully. The cold of the void seeped into the room instantly. He huddled against the wall, shivering. Sarah crawled over to him, checking the seal on his mask with efficient, rough hands. Her proximity was sudden and overwhelming. In the strobing red light, her alien features looked stark, beautiful, and terrified. "Breathe," she commanded, her voice tinny through the comms built into the masks. Shallow breaths. Conserve the mix. The ship stabilized, but the gravity remained offline. They were floating slightly, tethered only by their grip on the cargo straps. Sarah's legs tangled with his as they drifted. Her armor clinked against his belt buckle. Jonah looked at her. She was staring at the pressure gauge on the tank, her brow furrowed. He could see the pulse beating in her throat, the way her bioluminescent markings flared with a soft, anxious blue light. He reached out, his hand brushing her arm to get her attention. She flinched, looking at him with wide eyes. "Are we going to die?" he asked, the question absurdly calm. "Not today," Sarah said. She didn't pull away from his touch. In the zero-gravity silence, suspended in the red dark, the barrier between Mercenary and target felt incredibly thin. Jonah could smell the scent of her, something like cinnamon and ozone, even through the filtered air. He realized, with a jolt of panic that had nothing to do with the ship, that he wanted to hold her, not for safety, but because she was the only real thing in a universe that was rapidly unspooling. Sarah seemed to sense the shift. She looked at his hand on her arm, then up to his eyes. For a second, the mask slipped. He saw the flush of violet on her cheeks. She cleared her throat, pulling back and anchoring herself against a crate, putting a deliberate 2 feet of distance between them. "The pressure is stabilizing," she said, her voice strictly professional. "Keep the mask on until the green light cycles." The rest of the journey passed in a tense, loaded silence. When the warning lights finally ceased and the gravity returned, they were entering the outer atmosphere of a moon in the Eridus sector. But before they could land, the view screen in the hold, a small, cracked monitor, turned a static gray. The ship groaned, a sound like metal being twisted by a giant hand. The air in the hold shimmered. "Quantum storm," Sarah warned, grabbing the support straps. "Brace yourself. Time is going to get slippery." The sensation was not like motion. It was like being unmade. Jonah felt his consciousness stretch. The walls of the ship dissolved into mist. The sound of the engine slowed to a deep, guttural heartbeat. And then, he wasn't on the ship. He was standing in a kitchen. Sunlight streamed through a window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The smell of brewing calf was strong, ideally, perfectly strong. He turned, and Sarah was there. She was not wearing armor. She wore a simple tunic, her hair loose and falling over her shoulders. She was laughing at something he had just said, her eyes crinkled at the corners. There was no war in her face, no vigilance, only a deep, settled affection that spoke of years of shared mornings. She reached out, touching his cheek. "The coffee is ready, Jonah," she said. The joy that washed over him was devastating. It was a memory of a future that had never happened, a phantom limb of a life he hadn't lived. Then, the ship slammed back into normal space. The kitchen vanished. The cold metal floor returned. Jonah gasped, doubling over as nausea roiled through him. He looked up. Sarah was staring at him, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with shock. The bioluminescence on her neck was flashing erratic patterns of gold and gray. Did you see it? Jonah whispered, his voice shaking. Sarah turned away sharply, busying herself with her gear. Her hands were trembling. Temporal echo, she said, her voice rough. The quantum field reads synaptic desires and projects them. It is a glitch, a hallucination. It felt real, Jonah said. It was not. She snapped. She stood up, her back to him. We are landing. Get your gear. She refused to look at him, but Jonah saw her wipe her eyes quickly before she pulled her helmet on. The moon of Eridus was a graveyard of geology. Red dust coated everything, and the wind howled through canyons of jagged rock. They disembarked into a swirling sandstorm, the smuggler ship taking off immediately and leaving them in the desolation. We have 3 kilometers to the settlement, Sarah shouted over the wind. Keep your scarf up. The dust here is sharp enough to shred lung tissue. They trudged through the dunes, the silence between them heavy with the memory of the quantum vision. They reached the settlement, a cluster of hab units built into the side of a cliff, just as the sun began to set. Jonah led the way to a specific unit, marked with a faded blue symbol. This is it, he said. My contact. Her name is Kaylin. She can decode the second layer of the shard. The door was unlocked, a bad sign. Sarah drew her weapon, moving in first, clear. She signaled after a moment. Jonah entered. The interior was tidy, quiet, too quiet. He found Kaylin in the back room, sitting in her chair. She was dead, a single clean puncture wound to the neck, no blood, no struggle. A datapad lay on the desk next to her, wiped clean. Staged, Sarah said, scanning the room. Looks like a suicide injection, but the angle is wrong. A professional hit. Jonah stared at the body of his friend. He felt a cold numbness spreading through his chest. They knew, he said. They knew who I would run to. We have to move, Sarah said urgently. If they killed her, they likely trapped the... She cut off with a strangled cry, dropping to one knee. Her weapon clattered to the floor. Sarah! Jonah rushed to her. She was clutching her chest, her teeth clenched so hard he could hear them grinding. Her skin was burning hot, the markings flaring a violent, angry crimson. Kill switch, she gasped. They triggered the dormant command. My heart. It is seizing. Jonah panicked. He grabbed her shoulders, trying to keep her upright. What do I do? Tell me. Medkit. She wheezed. Red vial. Adrenaline synthesizer. It overrides the signal for a few minutes. Jonah tore the pouch from her belt, his fingers fumbling with the clasp. He found the red vial in the injector. He jammed it into the port on her neck armor, pressing the plunger. Sarah arched her back, a scream tearing from her throat as the drug hit her system. Then she slumped forward, panting, sweat soaking her hair. Go, she whispered. The signal. They can track it. I am a beacon. Leave me. No, Jonah said. He grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. I am not leaving you. You are an idiot, she snarled, though her voice lacked heat. I will get you killed. Then we die together, Jonah said. But I am not walking out that door alone. He pulled her up, wrapping her arm around his neck. She was heavy, dead weight, but she forced her legs to move. He dragged her to a heavy workbench, propping her up. He began to strip off her chest plate to access the kill switch interface underneath. Her breathing was ragged as the armor came off, revealing the sweat-slicked skin and the frantically pulsing markings. The intimacy of the moment hit them both like a physical blow. Jonah worked the keypad on the interface, his hands shaking. He bypassed the primary receiver, his fingers brushing against her skin. She shivered. Got it, he muttered. I jammed the receiver loop. It bought us maybe 2 hours. He looked up. Sarah was watching him. Her eyes were dark, pupils blown wide. The pain had stripped away her defenses. She reached out, grabbing his wrist. Her grip was strong, desperate. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you stay?" Jonah looked at her lips, then at her eyes. "Because you're the only one who didn't look away," he said. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The desire was sudden and sharp, a terrifying clarity in the middle of the chaos. Sarah leaned in, her gaze dropping to his mouth. Jonah leaned forward to meet her. Their breath mingled. It would be so easy, so stupid, so necessary. They froze inches apart. The sound of the wind outside roared in the silence. Then Sarah pulled back, a fraction of an inch. "Not like this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not when we are running." Jonah nodded, swallowing hard. He stepped back, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Right. Not like this." He turned to the desk, needing to do something with his hands. He picked up the data shard and plugged it into Kaylin's terminal. Maybe she left a backup key before she died. The screen lit up, but instead of code, it displayed a biometric scanner. "Access restricted. Requires biometric authorization. Subject Voss." Jonah stared at the screen. "Sarah?" She moved to his side, swaying slightly. "What is it?" "The shard," Jonah said, confusion clouding his voice. "It's asking for you, not your codes. Your DNA." Sarah frowned. "That makes no sense. I have never worked for the Senate directly." "Try it," Jonah said. She placed her hand on the panel. The scanner hummed. "Identity confirmed. Asset 9 Alpha. Project Chimera." The screen flooded with data, blueprints, genetic sequences, and a video log dated 20 years ago. Sarah stared at the file header. Project Chimera, looking at a file that detailed the creation of a super soldier class. "I was not hired," she whispered, horror dawning on her face. "I was built. The orphanage. My parents. They are implants. False memories." Before Jonah could respond, a shadow fell across the doorway, touching reunion. A deep voice rumbled. They spun around. Standing in the entrance, blocking out the dying light, was a massive figure. He was of Sarah's species, but larger, his armor matte black and scarred. He held a heavy plasma repeater with casual ease. "Rix." Sarah breathed. "The prototype finally figures it out," Rick said, stepping into the room. His grin was a slash of white in the gloom. "You were always slow on the uptake, Sarah. Too much sentimental coding in your batch." "Who is he?" Jonah asked, stepping in front of Sarah. "I am the upgrade," Rick said, "and you, human, are collateral damage." He raised the weapon. "Run!" Sarah shouted, shoving Jonah toward the back exit. They burst out into the canyon just as the room behind them exploded in a ball of superheated plasma. They sprinted into the relic canyon, the towering shapes of ancient machines rising on either side like jagged teeth. The ground was uneven, treacherous. Rix was behind them, firing indiscriminately. Explosions rocked the canyon walls, sending showers of rock raining down. Sarah stumbled, a piece of shrapnel slicing her arm. Blood, violet and glowing, spattered onto the metallic side of a buried relic. Instantly, a deep, resonant hum vibrated through the canyon. The lights on the ancient machines flickered on, amber and pulsating. "The canyon," Jonah yelled. "It's reacting to you." "Your blood," Sarah realized. "It is the key, just like the shard." The machines began to shift. Walls of metal groaned and moved, creating cover, blocking Rix's line of sight. The canyon was protecting her. They slid down a shale slope, hiding beneath the overhang of a massive engine block. Rix's heavy footsteps shook the ground above them, but the shifting geometry of the relics had cut him off for the moment. Sarah leaned against the cold metal, clutching her bleeding arm. She looked at Jonah, her eyes wild. "I am a product," she said, her voice breaking. "Everything I am.
No, I'm dead.
My honor. My code. It was programmed." Jonah grabbed her shoulders. "No. They programmed the skills. They programmed the loyalty. But they didn't program you to save me. They didn't program you to feel guilt." He looked at the contract token embedded in her gauntlet. It was blinking rapidly. A command override from the Helix Dominion. "Return to base. Submit for recalibration." Sarah looked at it. She looked at Jonah. Then, with a cry of pure rage, she slammed her gauntlet against the jagged edge of the relic. She twisted her wrist, ripping the token out of its socket. Sparks flew, searing her skin, but she didn't stop until the device came free. She threw the smoking token onto the ground and crushed it under her boot. "Sarah." Jonah breathed. "I am done being their asset," she said, her voice hard as diamond. She looked at Jonah, and for the first time, her smile was entirely her own, fierce, terrified, and free. "Now," she said, "let us see how they handle a weapon that decides to aim itself." The floating city of Mnemosyne was less a habitation and more a suspended server rack, drifting in the turbulent upper atmosphere of a gas giant. It was a vertical favela of cooling towers, data spires, and hanging walkways, bathed in the perpetual twilight of the planet's storms. Here, information was the only commodity that mattered. You could buy the launch codes for a dreadnought or the secret favorite color of a senator's mistress, provided you had the credits or a secret of your own to trade. Jonah Cade stood in the observation gallery of a crowded data bazaar, watching the chaotic flow of the market. He was waiting for a contact from the shadow feed, a network of rogue journalists and activists who operated in the blind spots of the Concordate surveillance state. Above him, a massive holographic screen dominated the ceiling, broadcasting the Senate proceedings from the core worlds. Senator Vance, the architect of the current border crisis, was speaking with practiced gravitas. His face was 10 meters high, smoothed by digital filters. "We must stand united against the unknown," Vance intoned, his voice booming over the noise of the hackers and spies below. "The Helix Dominion offers us security. To question their methods is to question our very survival." Jonah watched the screen, then looked down at the transaction happening 5 feet away.
I'm sorry.
A nervous young aide, wearing the distinctive lapel pin of Senator Vance's own staff, was handing a decrypt chip to a shadowy information broker. Jonah knew what was on that chip.
At all.
It was a hush payment record to bury a scandal about defective life support systems in the outer colonies. Sarah Voss leaned against the railing beside him. She had replaced her damaged armor with scavenged plating painted a matte, non-reflective gray. She watched the aide scurry away, then looked up at the giant, benevolent face of the senator. "Your species lies with impressive confidence," she noted, her tone dry. "It is a survival trait," Jonah muttered. "We call it politics. It is inefficient," Sarah said. "In the Dominion, if a superior officer wants to deceive you, they simply omit the data from your briefing. They do not perform theater." Jonah looked at her. "And you prefer that? Being blindfolded instead of lied to?" Sarah's amber eyes tracked a drone buzzing near the ceiling. "I prefer to know that I am blindfolded. Your people convince themselves they can see, even when they are staring at a painted wall." A courier drone dropped from the shadows, hovering in front of Jonah. It scanned his retina, chirped, and dispensed a tiny physical sliver of silicon. The journalist network had come through. Jonah slotted it into his datapad. "I have the encryption key for the next layer of the shard," he said. But we need to move. The surgeon is expecting us in Sector 9. The surgeon was a Telleran named Dr. Vix, operating out of a converted med bay that smelled of antiseptic and ozone. He was expensive, illegal, and the best neurocyberneticist on the black market. Sarah sat on the diagnostic table, the back of her tunic open to reveal the spinal interface where the kill switch was embedded. Vix ran a scanner over her neck, the hum of the device loud in the quiet room. "I can disable it," Vix said, his voice a wet rasp. "The helix mechanics are crude but effective. It is woven directly into your brainstem, specifically the hippocampus and the amygdala." "Do it," Sarah said, staring at the wall. "There is a cost. Mercenary," Vix warned, lowering the scanner. "To extract the hardware safely, I must purge the neural pathways it is anchored to. The kill switch is rooted in your long-term memory centers." Sarah stiffened. "Explain. If I pull it out, I might pull out everything else with it," Vix said bluntly. "Your childhood, your training, the names of your squad mates. You will wake up with your motor skills intact, but your personal history will be a blank slate." The room went silent. Jonah looked at Sarah. He knew the truth she had discovered on the moon, that her memories were likely fabricated implants anyway. But knowing they were fake and losing them entirely were two very different traumas. Even a lie, if lived long enough, feels like a home. Jonah stepped forward. "We can't do that." Sarah held up a hand to silence him. She looked at Vix. "How much will I lose? 20%? 60%? Vix shrugged. "It is a gamble. But if that switch activates, you lose 100% of your life." Sarah looked down at her hands. The hands of a killer. The hands of a woman who had saved Jonah Cade when she should have let him die. Jonah moved between her and the surgeon. "Sarah, no. We will find another way. I will not ask you to erase yourself for this mission. I can go on alone. You can stay here. Go to ground." Sarah's head snapped up. Her eyes flashed with a sudden, fierce anger. "Do not presume to make my choices human," she snapped. "I am trying to save you," Jonah argued. "You are trying to absolve yourself," she countered, sliding off the table and standing to her full height, towering over him. "You think I am doing this for you? For your revolution?" "Yes," Jonah shouted back. "Because you're a hero, damn it. Even if you were built not to be one, I am not a hero." She slammed her hand against the metal wall, the sound ringing like a gunshot. "I am a product, and if I let them keep this switch in my head, I remain their property. If I cut it out, even if I lose the memories, I become mine." She breathed heavily, her chest heaving. Jonah saw the bioluminescence flaring along her collarbone, a jagged, chaotic mix of crimson and violet, pain and rage. Sarah turned back to Vix. "Prep the surgery." Vix nodded and turned to his console. But before he could initiate the sequence, Jonah's datapad chimed, a high-priority alert from the Shard. Jonah looked at the screen. The new key from the journalist had unlocked the next waypoint. His blood ran cold. "Sarah, wait," he said. "Not now. Jonah, look at this," he insisted, thrusting the pad toward her. "The Astra Loom. The coordinates, they aren't on a planet. They are on a ship." Sarah glanced at the screen, her frown deepening. "The Vox Populi? That was a diplomatic cruiser. It vanished 3 months ago during the peace talks." "It didn't vanish," Jonah said. "It's in the silent zone, a dead space sector where no signals can get in or out. And according to this, the loom isn't just on the ship. The ship is the test bed. If we stay for the surgery, we lose the window." Sarah realized. The data indicates the ship is drifting into a gravity well. It will be crushed in 12 hours. She looked at Vix, then at Jonah. The choice hung in the air, her freedom, or the truth that could stop a war. Sarah buttoned her tunic, covering the kill switch. "We go," she said quietly. "But the switch," Jonah started. "We'll have to wait," she said. She grabbed her gear. "If the Helix Dominion gets to that ship first, it will not matter if I have memories or not. There will be no one left to remember anything true." They took a fast stealth shuttle deep into the silent zone. The region was a graveyard of static, a place where the stars seemed dimmer, choked by cosmic dust. They docked with the Vox Populi in silence. The diplomatic cruiser was dark, listing lazily in the void. Inside, the air was freezing. The life support was running on emergency reserves. They floated through the corridors in zero gravity, pulling themselves along handholds. The ship was a tomb, but not a violent one. In the main banquet hall, globules of champagne floated in the air like golden planets. Plates of food, freeze-dried by the vacuum, drifted in lazy orbits. There were no bodies. "It is like the rapture," Jonah whispered. "Where is the crew? Where are the diplomats?" Sarah pushed off a floating table. "Keep moving. The bridge is this way." They passed a mural on the wall of the officers' mess. It was drawn in bright, childish crayons, stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. "Why is there a children's mural on a diplomatic warship?" Sarah asked, pausing to look at it. "Maybe families were on board for the peace summit," Jonah suggested. "No," Sarah said, her voice tight. "This is a restricted vessel. No civilians, no children. This does not belong here."
How dare you?
As they reached the upper deck, a sudden wave of distortion washed over them. It was the same sensation as the quantum storm, but sharper, more aggressive.
Is there another one?
Jonah grabbed a bulkhead as gravity suddenly slammed back on, dropping them to the deck. The lights flared to blinding white. The silence was shattered by the sound of voices, hundreds of them, glasses clinking, laughter, music. Jonah looked around. The banquet hall was full. Dignitaries from the Concordat and the Helix Dominion were mingling. He saw Senator Vance, younger, smiling. He saw generals shaking hands. "It's a hologram?" Jonah asked, scrambling up. "No," Sarah said, her weapon raised, tracking ghosts. "Listen." The audio was looping. "We agree to the terms of the armistice. Peace is the only path forward." Then, a glitch. The visual stuttered. The smiling faces twisted. "Burn them all. Leave no witnesses." The narrative requires a tragedy. The scene reset. Champagne poured. Laughter. "We agree to the terms." It is a memory loop. Jonah realized, horror dawning on him. The loom. It doesn't just broadcast propaganda. It rewrites the event itself. This ship. It's trapped in the moment the history was changed. The ship groaned, and the distortion wave hit again. This time, the gravity failed. They were thrown into a corridor as the reality of the ship tried to decide between the peace treaty and the massacre. "Into here!" Sarah shouted, pulling Jonah into a small executive cabin and slamming the lock. The room was stable, immune to the storm raging in the hall. It was a small, intimate space, a bed, a desk, a viewport looking out at the uncaring stars. They collapsed against the door, breathing hard. The proximity was instant and electric. The adrenaline of the chase crashed into the exhaustion of the flight. Sarah slid down to the floor, removing her helmet. Her hair was matted with sweat. She started to unbuckle her chest plate. It was cracked, digging into her ribs. "Let me help," Jonah said, kneeling beside her. He expected her to flinch, to pull away with her usual deflection. Instead, she stayed still. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "Don't look human," she whispered. but the words had no bite. It was a reflex, a ghost of their old dynamic. "I'm looking," Jonah said softly. He undid the clasps. The heavy armor fell away. Beneath the mesh undersuit, her skin was a map of bioluminescent light, but it wasn't the angry red of pain or the dull gray of fear. It was a soft, pulsing teal, a color he hadn't seen before. It rippled from her heart, down her arms, responding to his presence. "What does this mean?" Jonah asked, tracing the line of light on her forearm without touching the skin.
What the fuck is going on?
"This color, it means safety," Sarah said, her voice low. "It means the absence of a threat." She looked at her own hands. "I was built to be a weapon. Jonah, I have files in my head that tell me how to kill you in 14 different ways with a spoon.
New here.
I have no memories that are truly mine. I am terrified that if I stop moving, if I stop fighting, I will simply cease to exist,
Hold on, let me just learn how
like
to
a program that has finished its run." Jonah reached out, taking her hand. His thumb brushed the pulse point of her wrist. "You are not a program," he said firmly. "A program doesn't laugh at my terrible jokes. A program doesn't risk its life for a stranger." "I am afraid," she confessed. It was the bravest thing he had ever heard her say. "I'm scared too," Jonah admitted. "I'm a signals analyst. I sit in dark rooms and listen to other people live. When I stole that shard, I wanted to be a hero. But when the shooting started, I just wanted to run. I'm a coward." "Sarah, you are here," she said.
I don't.
"You walked into a kill box on a desert moon. You boarded a haunted ship. That is not cowardice." She leaned forward. The space between them evaporated. Jonah could feel the heat of her skin, smell the scent of rain and ozone. Her gaze dropped to his mouth, then back to his eyes. The invitation was there, open and raw. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to pull her close and forget the war, the loom, the kill switch. The ache in his chest was sharp enough to be physical pain.
He's coming.
His hand moved up to cup her jaw. Her skin was incredibly soft. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. Then she stopped. She pulled back, just an inch, her breathing ragged.
How do I aim?
"Not because we are afraid," she whispered. Jonah froze. He understood. If they crossed this line now, huddled in the dark, it would be a reaction to the trauma. It would be using each other to keep the fear at bay.
Oh, wait, I
"Not
go
because
back.
we're afraid," he repeated, his voice husky.
I'm on.
He dropped his hand,
You look cool. Hey.
though it cost him everything to do it. "When we win," he said. "When you are free of the switch. When we are safe. Then I would very much like to continue this."
If you want to join.
Sarah opened her eyes. The teal light on her skin flared brighter, laced with a warm gold. "I would like that too," she said. The moment held, suspended and perfect in its restraint.
Hello.
Then, the ship shuddered. The loop was resetting. "We need to find the bridge," Sarah said, standing up and pulling her armor back on. The armor of a soldier, but the eyes of a woman who had made a choice. They fought their way to the bridge through shifting gravity and screaming ghosts. The captain's chair was occupied. A corpse, long dead, sat strapped in, but the log was still active, blinking in time with the loop. Jonah accessed the terminal. "This isn't just a record," he said. "It's the source code for the loop." He played the final entry. The captain's face appeared on the screen, the same man they had seen in the hologram, toasting to peace.
TK.
But here, he looked haunted. Log entry 459. The test was a success. The loom prototype successfully overwrote the cognitive consensus of the crew. They believed the negotiations failed. They believed the attack was unprovoked.
Hopefully you can hear me.
"I have erased the truth." The captain paused, wiping a hand over his face. "But the ship remembers." The localized reality is fracturing.
You can hear me,
I
right?
can't stop the echoes.
Okay.
If anyone finds this,
What
God
is
forgive
the-
us. We didn't just change the news, we killed the truth.
What is? What
Jonah
is
plugged in his
noise?
drive. I'm copying it. This is the proof. The loom doesn't just mind control, it breaks
No.
reality.
Now I'm just using like I
As
have
the
a little-
download finished, the airlock sensors chimed. Someone had docked.
I don't know what's
We have
going on.
company,
Let me show
Sarah
you.
said, checking her power cells.
So this is
They
the
raced
light.
back to the airlock, but they were cut off in the cargo bay.
Okay.
Rick stood there, flanked by 2 combat drones. He looked bigger in the confined space, a nightmare of black metal and scarred flesh.
The Focusrite thing.
You are persistent, little sister,
Yeah, I think
Rix rumbled. Sarah stepped in front of Jonah. Get out of my way. Rix, I have a counteroffer, Rix said. He tapped a command into his gauntlet. The Helix Dominion is impressed by your resilience. They are willing to overlook your defection. He took a step forward. Come back to the fold. Sarah. We will remove the kill switch. We will upload the Alpha Prime memory suite. You will have a past, a family, a history that makes sense.
better now.
You will be whole.
Maybe.
And Jonah?
Bad?
Sarah asked, her voice cold. Rix shrugged. The human is a loose end.
Don't go up.
He stays here, with the ghosts. Sarah didn't hesitate. She didn't even look at Jonah. My past is mine to build,
It's like a little-
she said, and I am not buying it with his life. Wrong answer, Rick said. He clenched his fist. The world turned white for Sarah. The kill switch activated.
Left right now.
It wasn't a warning pulse this time. It was a sledgehammer to her nervous system. She collapsed instantly, her body seizing in a rigid arc of agony. Sarah! Jonah screamed. He raised his stolen pulse pistol and fired blindly at Rix. The shot went wide, but it hit a volatile fuel conduit on the wall. Explosion. Fire roared through the bay. The drones were knocked back. Rix stumbled, shielding his face. Jonah didn't run for the door. He ran for Sarah. She was convulsing. Her eyes rolled back. He grabbed her harness, hauling her dead weight across the deck. The heat was blistering. He dragged her into the airlock, slamming the manual override. Rix was getting up, roaring in fury. But the blast door sealed just as a plasma bolt scorched the metal. Jonah cycled the lock and dragged her onto their shuttle. He punched the launch sequence, his hands slippery with blood. Hers. His. He didn't know. As the shuttle blasted away from the Vox Populi, Jonah unstrapped himself and scrambled to Sarah. She wasn't breathing. The bioluminescence was fading to a dull, lifeless gray. No, 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 Jonah chanted. He grabbed the relic fragment he had bought in the deep market, the one that whispered radio hymns. He grabbed the data shard. He remembered what Sarah had said about the kill switch. It was a signal receiver. If I can jam it or overload it. He stripped the wires of the relic fragment, jamming them into the data port on Sarah's neck armor. He connected the other end to the shuttle's comms array and the data shard.
What's the sound now?
He was building a bridge, a loop. The relic hummed. The shard pulsed. Suddenly,
There is
Sarah arched off the floor.
mic off right now.
A shockwave of pure energy blasted out from her body, frying the shuttle's lights. Her eyes snapped open. They weren't amber. They were bright, blinding white. She gasped, a sound like a drowning woman breaking the surface. The white faded from her eyes, returning to amber. She slumped back, chest heaving. The gray on her skin flushed back to a bruised, tender peach. Jonah sat back, his hands shaking uncontrollably. You're alive. Sarah looked at him, then at the jury-rigged mess of wires connecting her neck to the ship. What did you do? She rasped. I created a feedback loop, Jonah said, his voice trembling.
Streaming?
I used the shard to flood the receiver with data.
So I'm kinda debating
I think I tricked the
if
switch into thinking you were already dead.
'cause
Sarah touched the wires.
I don't know, this is kind of
She looked at the
frustrating.
data shard, which was now glowing in sync with her own heartbeat. It is not just a loop. Jonah, she whispered, staring at the connection. The shard. It is talking to me. I can feel the data. I can feel the code like it is my own blood. She looked up at him, and the realization was terrifying. I am not just compatible with the loom, she said. I am the interface. The Helix Dominion wants me back because I am the only thing that can turn the machine on without burning out. Jonah stared at her. You're the key. Sarah closed her hand over the wires. Then let us go find the lock, she said grimly, and break it. The jungle planet of Xylos breathed. It was not a passive landscape of trees and vines, it was a respiratory system of bioluminescent moss, sweating ferns, and canopy layers so thick they blotted out the sun, replacing it with a perpetual verdant twilight. The humidity was a physical weight, pressing against Jonah Cade's chest as he hacked through a wall of purple broadleaves. Ahead of them, rising from the jungle floor like a jagged tooth, stood the relay temple. It was made of black stone that seemed to drink the ambient light, etched with veins of gold that pulsed in time with the distant thunder. We are close, Sarah Voss said. She was moving in a crouch, her armor painted with mud to break up her silhouette. The node is inside the central spire. They were not alone. A dozen rebels, members of the Free Rim Coalition, moved with them. They were a ragged group, armed with scavenged concordant rifles in desperation. Their leader, a scarred Telleran named Kess, walked beside Jonah. Kess looked at the temple with a hunger that made Jonah uneasy. Once we control the loom node, Kess said, his voice a wet rasp, we can end this. We broadcast a command for immediate ceasefire. We rewrite the aggression centers of every soldier in the sector. Jonah stopped, wiping sweat from his eyes. He turned to Kess. We talked about this. We are using the loom to broadcast the truth, the evidence. We are not using it to rewrite minds. Kess scoffed, checking the charge on his plasma rifle. Truth takes time, analyst. Truth requires people to think, and people are stupid. If we use the loom to force a consensus of peace, the war ends in an hour. No more dead children, no more orbital bombardments. It is still violence, Jonah argued, his voice rising over the shrieking of the jungle insects. If you force goodness on people, it isn't goodness. It's just a lobotomy with better marketing. You become the thing you are fighting. We become winners. Kess snapped. He looked at Sarah, expecting the mercenary to side with the pragmatic, brutal option. You understand, Voss. You are a soldier. You know that victory is the only moral imperative. Sarah stopped scanning the perimeter. She turned her amber eyes on Kess. The look was cold enough to freeze the humidity in the air. I was built to follow orders, she said quietly. I had loyalty written into my genetic code. I had obedience fused to my spine. I killed people because I physically felt that it was the right thing to do. She took a step toward the rebel leader. You want to impose peace. You want to strip away the choice to be violent. Then you are just another architect of a prison. Peace without consent is just quiet slavery. Kess stared at her, unsettled by the intensity of her tone. He grunted, shifting his grip on his weapon. We can debate philosophy when we are not being hunted. Get the charges set. The group fanned out around the temple entrance. The plan was to rig the perimeter with explosives to buy time while Jonah and Sarah accessed the node. Jonah found himself kneeling in the mud beside Sarah, wiring a directional mine to a trip laser. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. You surprised me back there, he said, keeping his eyes on the wires, supporting my argument against the easy win. Sarah adjusted the blast angle of a claymore with terrifying precision.
Oh wait.
Do not get used to it. I generally find your idealism exhausting. I think it's charming, Jonah said, trying to lighten the crushing tension in a naive, doomed sort of way.
Oh fuck.
Sarah paused. She looked at his knotwork on the wire splice.
I think I got.
It was messy,
Over. No.
a functional disaster. She reached over, her gloved hands brushing his, and redid the splice in 3 seconds flat. Efficient, symmetrical, deadly. Your dexterity is appalling, she noted. I'm a signals analyst. Jonah defended. I type. I don't blow things up. In my culture, Sarah said, checking the connection.
Not even moving.
Correcting someone's tactical incompetence is considered a sign of deep affection. Jonah blinked, looking at her.
I swear I'm not.
Wait, are you flirting with me? Sarah didn't look up, but the bioluminescent markings on her neck flared a soft, embarrassed pink. I am criticizing your survival skills, human. If you choose to interpret that as romantic overture, that is your own processing error. Jonah grinned. It was a crooked, tired smile, but it reached his eyes. You're definitely flirting. You just called me a tactical disaster. That's practically a marriage proposal in Mercenary. Shut up and arm the detonator, she muttered. But she didn't pull her hand away from his for a long moment. The moment of levity shattered when the sky screamed. It wasn't thunder. It was the sonic boom of atmospheric entry above the canopy. The clouds were torn apart by burning contrails, dropships, massive, black, and bearing the double helix sigil of the Dominion. They found us, Kess shouted. Defensive positions. Sarah grabbed Jonah's harness, hauling him toward the temple entrance. They are not just here for a fight. Listen. The jungle air was suddenly filled with an amplified voice, booming from the descending ships. It was a smooth, synthetic voice, broadcasting on all frequencies. Residents of Xylos, do not panic. We are here to neutralize a terrorist threat. The rogue asset known as Sarah Voss and her accomplice, the radical extremist Jonah Cade, are in your sector. Jonah's face appeared on a holographic projection beamed from the lead ship, magnified against the clouds. It was a distorted image, making him look deranged, his eyes shadowed. These individuals are responsible for the massacre on the Vox Populi. The voice lied smoothly. They are armed and unstable. They seek to activate the relay to destabilize the planetary grid. Total cooperation is mandatory. They're rewriting the narrative in real time, Jonah said, watching his own face accuse him of crimes he hadn't committed. Sarah shoved him toward the temple's maw. Then let us give them a plot twist they did not write. Move. They ran into the temple. The interior was not dead stone. The walls were made of a dark, obsidian-like material that shifted and rippled like oil. The geometry of the place was non-Euclidean. Staircases seemed to twist upside down, and corridors narrowed and widened like breathing throats. The loom node is at the apex, Jonah said, checking his scanner. But the architecture, it's reactive, as Kess and his rebels panicked behind them, firing at shadows. The floor beneath them began to dissolve into liquid. Stop, Sarah commanded. Her voice echoed, authoritative and calm. The temple reacts to neurochemical states. It reads fear as instability. If you panic, the ground falls away. How do we cross? Kess yelled, staring at a chasm that had just opened up where the floor had been. Calm your minds, Sarah said. She stepped out onto the empty air over the chasm. Jonah watched, his breath caught in his throat. As Sarah's boot descended, a platform of solid black stone rose from the depths to meet it. She took another step, another platform. She was walking on trust. Follow her, Jonah said. Breathe. Just breathe. He stepped out. The stone rose to meet him. It felt warm, pulsating with a faint rhythmic thrum. They ascended the central spire, leaving the sounds of the battle outside, the plasma fire and explosions muffled by the living stone. They reached the inner sanctum, a spherical chamber dominated by the node. It was a column of light, suspended between two massive obsidian rings. It hummed with a sound that vibrated in Jonah's teeth. "The shard," Sarah said. "Give it to me." Jonah handed her the data shard. Sarah approached the column of light. As she drew near, the markings on her skin began to blaze. Not just the teal of safety or the red of pain, but a blinding, pure white. She is the interface, Jonah realized. The temple was built for her kind, or her kind was built for the temple. Sarah stepped into the light. She gasped, her back arching. The node didn't just accept the data, it projected it. The room was suddenly filled with holograms, but they were jagged, raw memories extracted from Sarah's mind. Jonah saw a laboratory, cold white walls. He saw a child, Sarah, but tiny, strapped to a chair. Subject 9 Alpha, a disembodied voice intoned. Empathy response is still too high. Initiate purge cycle. The child screamed. Sarah, standing in the light, screamed with her. More images flashed. Sarah as a teenager, executing a prisoner and being given a nutrient bar as a reward. Sarah lying in a tank, wires in her brain, while technicians discussed her expiration date. "It's too much," Jonah shouted, shielding his eyes from the glare. "It's breaking her!" He ran toward the light, but the energy field threw him back. "Sarah," he yelled, "listen to me. That isn't you. That is just the raw data." Sarah fell to her knees in the column of light. "I am a monster," she sobbed, her voice amplified by the room. "I am a hollow thing. I have no name. I have only function." Jonah scrambled up, fighting the pressure of the field. "You are not a function," he roared. He pushed his hand into the energy field. It burned, feeling like sticking his hand into a fusion reactor, but he grabbed her arm. "Look at me! Not at the pictures, look at me!" Sarah turned her head. Her eyes were white, blind with the data stream. "You are the person who shared an oxygen mask with me," Jonah said, his voice cracking. "You are the person who worries about debt. You are the person who saved my life because you wanted to, not because you were told to." He pulled her, trying to drag her out of the memory storm. "You chose me, Sarah. That choice makes you real." The white faded from her eyes. The amber returned, wet with tears. She focused on him. "I chose," she whispered, with a massive effort. She ripped herself free from the connection, collapsing into Jonah's arms. The holograms vanished. The column of light dimmed to a steady waiting hum. They lay on the floor of the sanctum, breathing hard. The ceiling above them was open to the sky, and outside, the battle had triggered the planet's weather systems. Bioluminescent rain began to fall, glowing blue droplets that hissed as they hit the warm stone. Sarah looked up at Jonah. She was trembling. Her armor was hot, her skin feverish. "They made me to end things," she whispered. "To end lives. To end descent." Jonah brushed wet hair from her forehead. The blue rain cast strange shadows on his face. "Then prove them wrong," he said. "Start something instead." The distance between them was gone. There was no hesitation this time. No fear of the future. The danger outside, the Dominion ships, the propaganda, the war, felt like it belonged to a different universe. Sarah grabbed the lapels of his jacket and pulled him down. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate. It tasted of rain and salt and the metallic tang of adrenaline. It was a collision of two people who had been running for too long and had finally found the only place where they could stop. Jonah held her as if she were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. He felt the tension leave her body, replaced by a fierce, demanding heat. It was a promise. It was a rebellion against every line of code that had ever told her she wasn't human enough to love. They broke apart, foreheads resting against each other, gasping for air. "We survived this," Sarah whispered against his lips. "You hear me, analyst? We survive?" "I hear you," Jonah said. The sound of a weapon charging broke the vow. They scrambled up, turning toward the entrance. Kess stood there, his plasma rifle leveled at Sarah's chest. The other rebels were behind him, looking grim. "Step away from the interface." "Voss," Kess said. "What are you doing?" Jonah asked, stepping in front of her. Kess didn't look at him. He looked at the Dominion comms link in his hand. "They offered us amnesty. Cade, full pardons, and the Cygnus sector, autonomous rule. All we have to do is hand over the asset. You sold us out," Sarah said, her voice dangerously calm. "I bought my people a future," Kess said. "I'm sorry. But one mercenary is a cheap price for a nation." Helix troops began to pour into the chamber behind the rebels. Black armor, heavy weapons. Sarah looked at Jonah. She looked at the shard in his hand. Then she looked at the skylight above the node. "Run," she said softly. "What?" Jonah stared at her. "Run!" Sarah shouted. She moved, not toward Kess, but toward the structural supports of the walkway they were standing on. She fired a pulse blast into the living stone. The temple reacted to the violence. The floor shuddered and screamed. The bridge beneath Jonah crumbled, sliding him down a chute of shifting rock toward the lower levels. "Sarah!" he screamed, reaching for her. She didn't take his hand. She turned to face the incoming squad, drawing a combat knife as her pulse pistol ran dry. She stood between him and the enemy, a lone figure in gray armor against a tide of black. "Go!" she roared, throwing herself at the first soldier. Jonah slid into the dark, watching her fight until the shifting stone sealed the passage above him. He tumbled out of a drainage vent into the jungle mud, a kilometer from the temple. He was alone. He had the shard. He had the partial key. And he had a hole in his chest where his heart used to be. He watched the temple. Lights flared in the distance. They had her. Jonah gripped the shard until his knuckles turned white. He could run. He could disappear into the jungle, find a ship, vanish into the rim worlds. He could live. He looked at the Dominion command ship hovering above the canopy. It was a fortress in the sky, broadcasting its lies to the world. "No," Jonah said to the rain. He wasn't a soldier. He couldn't storm that ship with a gun. But he was a signals analyst. And that ship was currently the loudest broadcasting tower in the system. He began to climb, not away from the danger, but toward the nearest Dominion relay tower on the ridge. 40 minutes later, the broadcast on Xylos changed. The smooth voice of the Dominion propaganda machine cut out with a screech of static. The holographic screens in the cities, the audio feeds in the helmets of the soldiers, the monitors on the bridge of the command ship, they all flickered. A face appeared. It was Jonah Cade. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. He was wet with rain. He looked terrified, but his eyes were hard. "My name is Jonah Cade," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "I am the terrorist you were warned about. And I have a confession." Inside the command ship, officers scrambled. "Cut the feed," someone shouted. "It's a localized override. He's in the relay network." Jonah continued, speaking to the camera he had jury-rigged. "I confess that I stole a data shard. I confess that I ran. But I am not here to tell you what to think. I am here to show you what they are hiding." He didn't play the evidence yet. He knew he needed to buy time. "They told you Sarah Voss is a monster," Jonah said. "They told you she is a weapon. They are right. She is a weapon,
God damn.
but she is the kind of weapon that breaks the hand that holds it. He looked directly into the lens. I am coming for her. And if you are listening, if you are tired of being lied to, watch this frequency. He triggered a loop of the code, a chaotic viral signal that would jam their internal sensors for 10 minutes. It was a distraction. While the bridge crew fought the cyber attack, Jonah dropped from the ventilation shaft into the detention block of the flagship. He had used the relay tower to bounce his signal, making it look like he was miles away, while he had actually hitched a ride on a supply drone returning to the ship. He moved through the corridors, shooting out cameras. He found the high-security wing. The door to Cell 1 was guarded by 2 soldiers. Jonah didn't fight them. He threw the directional mine he had saved from the jungle, the one Sarah had fixed. The explosion blew the door off its hinges. Jonah walked through the smoke. The cell was white, clinical. In the center, Sarah was strapped to a vertical frame. They had stripped her of her armor. They had stripped her of her tunic. She was bare to the waist, her body a map of wires and probes. They were forcing her bioluminescence to flare, using pain to jumpstart the loom interface compatibility. Her skin was blindingly bright, pulsing with jagged, agonizing rhythms. She heard him enter. She couldn't lift her head. Her voice was a ruin, hoarse from screaming. "Don't look, human," she croaked. It wasn't like the first time in the HAB module when she was embarrassed. It wasn't like the time on the ship when she was afraid. This was shame, deep, acidic shame. She didn't want him to see her like this, reduced to hardware, pinned like a specimen, her autonomy stripped away. Jonah walked up to the frame. He holstered his pistol. He reached out, ignoring the heat radiating from her skin, and placed his hands on her face. He looked at the wires digging into her flesh. He looked at the tears tracking through the glowing markings. "I'm looking," he said, his voice fierce and breaking. He leaned his forehead against hers. "I'm looking at everything. Sarah. So I can stop it." He reached for the release clamp on the restraint. "Now," he said, "let's go rewrite a war." The alarms on the Helix Dominion command ship were not a siren. They were a scream of digital panic that vibrated through the deck plates. Jonah Cade half-carried, half-dragged Sarah Voss down the corridor, the smoke from his earlier explosion providing a choking, gray cover. Sarah was a dead weight against his side, her bare feet slipping on the slick metal floor. The torture harness had left angry red welts across her torso, and her skin was still flashing with the aftershocks of forced bioluminescence. Jagged staccato bursts of white and violet that illuminated the smoke like lightning in a storm cloud. "We need a ship," Jonah coughed, firing a blind shot behind them to suppress the squad of heavy troopers turning the corner. "Hangar 3, Sarah rasped. Her voice was wrecked, but her mind was rebooting, calculating odds even through the pain. "It is the closest." They burst into the hangar bay just as the blast doors began to cycle shut. A sleek, black stealth cutter sat on the pad, fueling lines still attached. Jonah didn't bother with the disconnect protocols. He shoved Sarah up the ramp and slammed the launch sequence hard enough to crack the console. The ship lurched, tearing the fuel lines free in a spray of volatile liquid that ignited on the deck below. They shot out of the hangar bay on a pillar of fire, diving toward the jungle canopy of xylos below. The sky outside was terrifying. The loom node in the temple below had fully awakened. A pillar of pure, iridescent light pierced the clouds, widening with every second like a dilation pupil. The atmosphere was reacting. Auroras danced in broad daylight, and gravity wells formed and collapsed spontaneously, yanking their ship sideways. Jonah wrestled the controls, fighting the turbulence. "The jungle is a war zone," he shouted over the roar of the engines. "The rebel factions have splintered. Kess and his loyalists are fighting the purists. The Dominion has ground troops everywhere. Sarah sat in the co-pilot seat, her hands moving over a diagnostic interface she had pulled from the dashboard.
Oh my god.
She wasn't looking at the battle. She was looking at her own bio readings. "Jonah," she said. The tone of her voice made his blood run cold. It was calm. Too calm. "What?" he asked, banking the ship hard to avoid a surface-to-air missile. "The interface they used on me," she said, staring at the screen. "They did not just try to force a connection. They established a dead man's switch." Jonah glanced at her. "What does that mean?" "It means my nervous system is now the carrier signal for the consensus overwrite," she explained. "If my heart stops, if the neural activity in my brain ceases, the loom interprets it as a command execution. It will trigger the global mind wipe automatically." Jonah stared at her, the ship drifting for a dangerous second. "You are the trigger." "I am the failsafe," Sarah corrected. The Helix Dominion ensured that if they could not control me, no one else could have me. If I die. Jonah, the free will of every sentient being in this system dies with me. Jonah gripped the controls, his knuckles white. "Then you are not allowed to die. That is an order. Voss." Sarah looked at him, a faint, ghost-like smile touching her lips. "Understood." They crashed the ship into the soft loam of the jungle floor, 2 kilometers from the temple. The hull groaned and buckled, but held. They scrambled out into the humidity, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burning vegetation. Jonah pulled his datapad. He had set the leak to run while they escaped. The confession from the Vox Populi captain, the proof that the war was staged, was now broadcasting on every open frequency. "It's out," Jonah said, checking the feed as they ran through the fern-choked undergrowth. The confession, the financial records. Sarah scanned the perimeter, wielding a pulse rifle she had scavenged from the ship's locker. "Is it working?" Jonah stopped, staring at the screen. The feed was chaos. The Concordate had not stayed silent. For every second of the captain's confession, they had flooded the network with 10 seconds of noise. Deep fake videos showed Jonah accepting bribes from separatist terrorists. Manufactured audio logs had Sarah admitting to slaughtering children for sport. "It is a brawl," Jonah said, horrified. "They aren't trying to delete the truth. They are just drowning it. People don't know what to believe. Look at the comments. Half of them think the captain's video is the fake." "Truth is not a bullet," Sarah said, urging him forward. "You cannot just fire it and expect the enemy to fall. It is a siege. And right now, we are losing the ground war." They reached the perimeter of the temple. The battle here was visceral. Kess's rebels were entrenched in the ruins, trading fire with Dominion shock troopers. The temple itself was reacting to the violence. The black stone walls were undulating, forming spikes and barriers that shifted with the flow of adrenaline and rage. "We need to get to the core," Sarah said. "If we can access the primary node manually, we can override the fail switch." They fought their way toward the bridge that spanned the central chasm, the same chasm they had crossed earlier on Faith. But the bridge had changed. It was no longer a smooth path. The emotional intensity of the battle had twisted it into a nightmare of jagged obsidian shards and floating platforms that collided and shattered. Standing in the center of the broken bridge was Rix. The massive mercenary was battered. His armor was scorched, his helmet gone, revealing a face twisted by a fury so potent it seemed to be warping the reality around him. The stone beneath his boots boiled like tar. "Going somewhere, little sister?" Rix bellowed. His voice was amplified by the acoustics of the living stone. Jonah raised his pistol, but Sarah pushed his arm down. "Go," she said. Get to the node. I will clear the path. He'll kill you, Jonah said. He will try, Sarah corrected. She handed him the shard. You are the analyst. Go solve the puzzle. I am the soldier. Let me handle the war. Jonah looked at her, seeing the unresolved tension in her frame, the need for this closure. He nodded once, sprinting for the side passage that led to the upper vents. Sarah stepped onto the bridge. Rix laughed. He activated a plasma whip, the lash crackling with green energy. You look weak. Sarah, you look soft. I am focused, Sarah said, drawing her combat knife. Rix lunged. The fight was not a choreographed dance. It was a collision of tectonic plates. Rix was stronger, heavier, fueled by a lifetime of conditioning that equated power with dominance. He struck with the whip, shattering the stone platform Sarah stood on. Sarah leaped to a floating fragment, moving with a fluidity that Rix lacked. The bridge reacted to them. Rix's rage made the stone brittle, sharp, treacherous. Sarah's cold determination made the platform she touched stabilize, widening to give her footing. You are broken, Rix roared, swinging the whip. You let that human contaminate you. You can't love. Sarah, you are a machine. You can only attach. You are just glitching because your programming is confused. Sarah ducked under the lash, feeling the heat sear the air above her head. She rolled, coming up inside his guard. Attachment is a subroutine. Rix sneered, kicking her back. Love is a weakness. Sarah skidded across the stone, stopping at the edge of the abyss. She looked up at him. The bioluminescence on her skin flared, not red with pain, not white with overload, but a steady, burning gold. You are wrong, she said. Rix charged, intending to bull-rush her over the edge. Sarah didn't meet his force with force. She stepped aside, pivoting on her heel. It was a move of perfect economy. As Rix stumbled past, carried by his own momentum, she slashed his hamstring. Rix fell, crashing onto the edge of the platform. His whip skittered away into the dark. He scrambled to get up, but Sarah was already there, her knife pressed against the exposed seal of his neck armor. Finish it, Rix screamed, spit flying from his mouth. Do it! Prove you are one of us! Sarah looked down at him. Her hand was steady. It would be easy. It would be logical. He was a threat. The manual said neutralize the threat. But she looked at the fear in his eyes, the terrified realization that he was about to be deleted. No, Sarah said. She retracted the knife and stepped back. Rix stared at her, baffled. You are weak. Sarah sheathed the blade. Power without mercy is just a different kind of chain. Rix, I am done wearing chains, and I am done forging them for others. She turned her back on him and leaped across the remaining gap to the far side of the chasm. Rix stayed on the ground, defeated not by violence, but by the shattering of his worldview. He didn't follow. Jonah reached the loom node core just as Sarah arrived from the lower entrance. The core chamber was chaos. The pillar of light was deafening now, a roaring waterfall of energy. Helix Dominion troops were cutting through the north door. Kess and his rebels were setting charges on the south door. They were trapped in the middle. Jonah ran to the console. The interface is locked. It's cycling too fast. Sarah joined him, her hands flying over the controls. The node, it is trying to show us something. The light expanded, swallowing the room. The sounds of the plasma fire faded. Suddenly, they were not in the temple. They were standing in a high-rise apartment in the capital city. Outside the window, statues of Sarah and Jonah stood in the square. People marched in perfect rhythmic unison. There was no crime. There was no shouting. There was no art. We used the loom to force peace, Jonah whispered, looking at the dead eyes of the pedestrians. We won, and we created a hive mind. The scene shifted. They were in a crater. Smoke rose from the ruins of the temple. Their bodies lay side by side, hands clasped in death. Above them, a statue of Kes held a flag. The war continued, fueled by their martyrdom. We died, Sarah said, her voice hollow, and nothing changed. They just used our names to sell new weapons. The scene shifted again. A quiet farmhouse on a rim world. Jonah was older, grayer. Sarah was tending a garden. They were safe. But in the sky above, the stars were burning. The Concordat had enslaved the galaxy while they hid. We walked away, Jonah said. The vision collapsed. They were back in the roaring chamber. The door blast shields were buckling under the assault from both sides. None of those futures are acceptable, Sarah said. Jonah looked at her. The air between them shimmered with the energy of the loom. He could see every pore on her face, every scar. We can't force them, Jonah said. And we can't run. And if we die, if I die, the world ends, Sarah reminded him. Jonah grabbed her shoulders. He pulled her close, ignoring the battle raging inches from the door. I want a future where we don't have to fix everything, he said, his voice raw. I want a future where we just get breakfast. I want you, Sarah. Not as a symbol, not as a savior, just you. Sarah looked at him. Her amber eyes were wide, stripping away the soldier, the weapon, the tool. I am terrified, she admitted. I have never been without a mission. I do not know how to just be. We figure it out, Jonah said. Together. The desire hit them then, not the frantic lust of the escape, but a deep, gravitational pull. It was the realization that they were the only two people in the universe who actually knew each other. Sarah leaned her forehead against his. I choose this, she whispered. I choose the fear. I choose you. A blast rocked the room. The north door gave way. Helix troopers poured in. We need a third option, Jonah shouted, spinning back to the console. He jammed the shard into the port. The code scrolled frantically. Wait. Jonah froze. He stared at the code. What is it? Sarah fired a suppression volley at the troopers, forcing them into cover. This code, the original encryption on the shard. Jonah's face went pale. It wasn't Concordat encryption, it was Helix source code. He turned to Sarah, horror in his eyes. I didn't steal it, he whispered. They let me take it. Sarah paused, reloading her weapon. Explain. The tracking algorithm. It was designed to lead me to you, Jonah said, his voice trembling. They knew you were the key. They knew they couldn't find you in the deep market. So they baited a trap. They put the shard where an arrogant analyst would find it, knowing I would run, knowing I would eventually cross paths with a mercenary. He slumped against the console. I did this. I led them to you. I am the reason you are in this chair. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing him. He had thought he was a player in the game. He had been a pawn the entire time. Jonah. Sarah's voice was sharp. She grabbed his chin, forcing him to look at her. I led you into the trap, he choked out. Sarah's eyes were fierce. They set the snare. Jonah. They dug the pit. They sharpened the stakes. You just refused to become the teeth. She gestured to the door where she was holding back an army. You could have left me on the station. You could have left me on the moon. You could have left me on the ship. You didn't. The trap worked. Yes. But you broke the mechanism when you treated me like a person instead of a target. She kissed him, hard, brief, and absolute. Do not dare take credit for my choices, analyst. I am here because I want to be. Now. Solve the problem. Jonah took a breath. He nodded. The guilt didn't vanish. but her forgiveness gave him the strength to carry it. Third option, he said, his fingers flying over the keys. We don't rewrite minds. We don't force peace. What then? We drown the lies, Jonah said. We don't just broadcast the confession. We use the loom to broadcast the raw data, the financial logs, the communication transcripts, the surveillance footage of the massacres, unedited, unfiltered. And we don't just broadcast it to screens. He looked at the loom node. We broadcast it to the cognitive centers of every person in the system. We don't change their minds. We just give them the memory of the truth. They can choose to ignore it, but they won't be able to say they didn't see it. It is risky, Sarah said, firing again. The bandwidth required. It requires a full interface, Jonah said. The loom needs a biological processor to handle that much density. He looked at her. It needs you. Sarah looked at the pillar of light. If I interface fully, the surge could wipe me, she said quietly. It could burn out the neural pathways. I could lose everything again, or I could die. And if I die, the consensus overwrite triggers, Jonah finished. He stepped in front of the console. I'll do it. You are not compatible, Sarah said. I can jury-rig it, Jonah insisted. Like on the shuttle. It will burn me out. Yes. I'll definitely die. But it saves you. Sarah stared at him. You would trade your life for my memory? In a heartbeat, Jonah said. Sarah smiled. It was a sad, beautiful expression. Step away from the console. Jonah. No. Sarah grabbed his collar and pulled him into a hug. She whispered in his ear. My body was always someone else's tool. Jonah, my blood, my bones, my mind. They belong to the helix. They belong to the guild. She pulled back, looking him in the eye. This time, it is my choice, my risk, my sacrifice. Do not take that autonomy from me. Jonah looked at her. He wanted to argue. He wanted to scream, but he saw the resolve in her amber eyes. To deny her this was to treat her like a child to be protected, not a partner to be trusted. He stepped back. Do it, he whispered. Sarah stepped into the pillar of light. This time, there was no screaming. There was no resistance. She opened her arms, accepting the connection. The markings on her skin flared, not with the jagged light of pain, but with a unified, brilliant luminescence that matched the loom itself. The ceiling of the temple blew open. A beam of pure data shot into the sky, hitting the atmospheric relay and scattering across the system. In the orbit above, the screens on the Dominion ship froze. In the trenches outside, the rebels stopped firing. In the Senate chambers light years away, the holograms flickered. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a video. It was a sudden, collective memory downloading into billions of minds simultaneously. They saw the money changing hands. They saw the orders signed. They saw the Vox Populi burning. They saw Sarah being tortured in the lab. They saw the truth, naked and cold and undeniable. In the node chamber, Sarah arched back, her body acting as the conduit for the truth of a civilization. Jonah watched her, tears streaming down his face, screaming her name into the roaring light. Sarah. She looked at him one last time. Her eyes were dissolving into pure white light. Her lips moved. Don't look. Human. Then the light swallowed her whole. Jonah didn't look away. He stood his ground, witnessing her fire, refusing to blink until the explosion of energy knocked him into darkness. The shuttle they had stolen from the burning jungle of Xylos was barely spaceworthy. It rattled like a tin can full of bolts as it broke the atmosphere of the celestial resort world. Arcadia Prime. This was where the Peace Summit was being held, a planet landscaped into a garden of aggressive perfection, where the grass was genetically modified to never brown, and the clouds were seeded to rain only at night. Jonah Cade sat in the co-pilot seat, clutching a portable loom core they had ripped from the temple console before the ceiling collapsed. It was a heavy, humming sphere of obsidian and light, warm to the touch. "We have 20 minutes before the keynote address," Sarah Voss said, banking the ship toward the dark side of the resort's moon to mask their approach. Her voice was steady, but her skin was pale. The massive data surge at the temple had nearly burned out her neural pathways. She was running on adrenaline and sheer, stubborn refusal to die. "The summit is a trap," Jonah said, checking the local feeds. "Look at the perimeter." The screen showed the Great Hall of Accord, a soaring glass structure surrounded by manicured lawns. But the airspace was choked with drones, not just news drones, but combat-class hunter-killers painted white to look like security detail. They circled like insects, hungry for a narrative. "The Concordat knows the truth is leaking," Sarah said. "The temple broadcast reached the outer systems, but the core worlds are still locked down. The Senate is jamming the signal and spinning a new story. They are claiming the temple data was a deep fake created by us." They need a tragedy, Jonah realized. A massacre that is so loud, so bloody, and so televised that it drowns out the evidence. They are going to blow up the summit, and they are going to blame it on the rogue mercenary and her radical analyst. Sarah finished. They landed the shuttle in a maintenance ravine 3 kilometers from the Great Hall. Sarah did not put on her full armor. The chest plate was cracked, and the servos were shot. She wore the mesh undersuit and a scavenged tactical vest, moving with a lightness that terrified Jonah. She looked less like a soldier and more like a blade without a sheath. "We infiltrate as staff," Sarah said, tossing him a stolen datapad with access codes she had skimmed from the Dominion network. Jonah looked at his reflection in the shuttle window. He was bruised, unshaven, and looked exactly like the desperate terrorist the news feed said he was. "I don't think I pass for a waiter," he said. Sarah looked at him. A flicker of that dry, dark humor surfaced in her eyes. "Then act like a supervisor. Walk fast, look angry, and carry a clipboard. No one questions a man who looks like he is about to fire them." They breached the service entrance of the Great Hall 10 minutes later. The interior was a blinding wash of white marble, gold filigree, and flags representing 1,000 worlds. It smelled of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. Jonah walked briskly through the catering staging area, holding his datapad like a shield. The room was bustling with servers carrying trays of canapes. He glanced at a stack of napkins. They were embossed with the Helix Dominion logo and the slogan, "Security is the foundation of liberty." "Subtle," Jonah muttered. "Even the shrimp are branded," Sarah whispered from beside him. She was wearing a stolen security jacket, her face hidden by a cap. They moved toward the main ballroom. The air was thick with tension. Diplomats in silk robes mingled with generals in dress uniforms. The laughter was brittle. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one wanted to be the first to stop smiling. Suddenly, the house lights flickered. A deep, resonant thrum vibrated through the floor. "It is starting," Sarah said, her hand going to the concealed pistol at her hip. The first explosion wasn't at the stage, it was at the exits. A fireball engulfed the main doors, shattering the glass and throwing bodies across the marble floor. Screams erupted. The crowd surged, a panic-stricken wave of velvet and gold. Jonah saw the security guards, the heroes hired by the Concordat, raise their weapons. But they didn't aim at the attackers because there were no attackers. They aimed at the crowd. "They're hurting them," Jonah yelled over the noise. "They want maximum casualties for the cameras." Drones swooped down from the ceiling, their red recording eyes blinking. They framed the shots perfectly. Weeping senators, brave soldiers firing into the smoke, and the chaos that would justify a century of martial law.
Oh, he's down.
"We need to get to the broadcast spire," Sarah shouted. They sprinted through the mayhem. A Helix enforcer stepped into their path, leveling a rifle. Sarah didn't break stride. She slid across the polished floor, kicking his legs out from under him, and silenced him with a precise strike to the throat. Jonah didn't stop to look. He was the carrier. He held the portable loom core against his chest, shielding it with his body as debris rained down around them. They reached the central spire, a massive column of data uplinks in the center of the hall. Sarah ripped the cover off the maintenance panel. "Plug it in," she commanded. Jonah jammed the core's interface cables into the spire. The obsidian sphere pulsed, waking up. Sarah grabbed the input leads. She didn't hesitate. She jammed the needles into the ports on her neck, crying out as the connection flared hot. "Cover me," she gasped, her eyes rolling back. Her markings blazed into life. The room seemed to warp around her. The loom wasn't just a transmitter, it was a reality engine. As Sarah interfaced, the air grew thin. Jonah could hear voices, millions of them overlapping in a deafening roar. It was the collective consciousness of the galaxy, waiting to be told what was real. Helix troopers were advancing on their position. Jonah drew his pistol. Crouching behind a decorative pillar, he wasn't a soldier. His hands shook, but he fired, keeping the soldiers back, buying her time. Sarah was convulsing. The data stream was too heavy. The Concordate's counter-narrative was fighting her. A tidal wave of lies trying to crush the truth she was holding. "I can't hold it," she gasped, her voice sounding like it was coming from everywhere at once. "They are too loud." Jonah turned to her, ignoring the plasma bolts chipping the marble above his head. "Sarah," he shouted, "focus on me." He reached out, grabbing her shoulder with his free hand. "You are not a product. You are not a weapon. You are Sarah Voss. You drink your calf black. You hate cold weather. You saved my life in a smuggler's hold." The white light in her eyes flickered, revealing the amber beneath. "Focus on the truth," Jonah yelled. "Not the big truth. Our truth," Sarah gasped, anchoring herself on his voice. She grit her teeth, her markings shifting from the chaotic white of overload to a fierce, burning gold. "I see them," she whispered. She didn't try to rewrite the minds of the people in the room. She didn't try to force them to be peaceful. She did what they had agreed on. She opened the floodgates. The loom fired. It wasn't a beam of light this time. It was a silence. For a heartbeat, every screen in the hall, every drone feed, every data pad went black. Then, the data hit. Massive holographic projections erupted from the spire, filling the smoke-choked hall. But they weren't the polished graphics of the news. They saw the financial transfer for the bomb that had just exploded, signed by Senator Vance 3 days ago. They saw the schematic for the terrorist drones, bearing the Helix Dominion manufacturing stamp. They saw the captain of the Vox Populi confessing to the murder of the peace delegation. They saw the email chain scripting the heroic narrative of the massacre, time-stamped before the first shot was fired. The fighting stopped. The guards lowered their rifles, looking at the giant, floating receipts of their own treachery. The diplomats stared at the evidence hovering in the air. It wasn't mind control. It was just the lights turning on in a dark room. The propaganda machine stuttered. On the screens, the news anchors froze, their teleprompters replaced by the raw data scrolling across the galaxy. Some people screamed in denial. A general threw his helmet at the projection. But others, the soldiers who realized they had been shooting civilians, the aides who realized they were disposable, stopped moving. The monopoly on reality shattered. "Well played," a voice said. The crowd parted. Walking calmly through the debris was Senator Vance. He was flanked by 2 elite Praetorian guards. He didn't look frightened. He looked bored. He stopped 10 meters from the spire, smoothing his silk suit. "You think this changes anything?" Vance asked, his voice amplified by his own lapel mic. "Facts are messy. Mr. Cade, people don't want facts. They want a story. They want to know who the bad guy is." Jonah stood up, keeping his hand on Sarah's shoulder. She was trembling, still locked into the interface, keeping the stream alive. "We just gave them a new story," Jonah said. "One where you aren't the hero." Vance smiled. It was a cold, reptilian expression. "Stories can be rewritten. Audiences can be made to forget. All I have to do is remove the narrator." He pulled a small device from his pocket, a remote detonator. "Not for a bomb, for Sarah. The kill switch," Vance said softly. "We bypassed your little feedback loop. Voss, the new code is absolute. Goodbye, asset." He pressed the button. Sarah didn't scream. Her body simply went rigid. The gold light on her skin turned a sickly, necrotic gray. The loom connection spiked, turning from a broadcast into a feedback scream. "She's dying," Jonah realized. The switch was trying to shut down her heart, and the loom was trying to keep the connection open. The conflict was tearing her apart. Jonah looked at Vance, then at Sarah. He couldn't shoot Vance fast enough to stop the signal. He couldn't unplug Sarah without the shock killing her. He did the only thing left. He grabbed the interface cables plugged into Sarah's neck. "Jonah, no!" she gasped, her voice paralyzed. He didn't listen. He slammed his hand onto the conductive coupling, creating a physical bridge. "I'm the ground!" he shouted. He let the surge hit him. It felt like being struck by lightning and drowned at the same time. The kill signal meant for Sarah's neurochemistry slammed into Jonah's unaugmented human nervous system. His vision went white. His heart stuttered. But he held on. He absorbed the spike, acting as a human fuse. The feedback loop reversed. The loom, sensing the hostile intrusion of the kill signal, traced it back to the source. The device in Vance's hand sparked. Then it exploded. Vance screamed, dropping the melted remote. The feedback surge traveled up the Praetorian Guard's comms, shorting out their armor. They collapsed. Jonah fell backward, disconnecting the cables as he hit the floor. The world was spinning. He tasted copper and ash. Sarah collapsed next to him, free of the interface. She crawled over to him, her movements frantic, terrified. "Jonah," she whispered. She grabbed his face, her hands shaking uncontrollably. He blinked. His vision was blurry, but he saw her. She was alive. The gray was gone from her skin, replaced by the soft, terrified teal of safety. "Did we win?" Jonah wheezed. Sarah looked around. The hall was in chaos, but it was a different kind of chaos now. Helix troops were surrendering. Diplomats were shouting at Vance. The narrative had broken. "We won," she sobbed, pulling him into her lap. "You idiot. You absolute catastrophic idiot. You could have stopped your heart. I have a very stubborn heart," Jonah managed to say. Sarah held him like he was the only solid thing in the universe. There was no armor between them now. Her tactical vest was open, her skin pressed against his jacket. She didn't care who saw. She didn't care about the cameras or the politics. She buried her face in his neck, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to be completely, utterly vulnerable. "I thought I lost you," she whispered into his skin. "You're stuck with me," Jonah murmured, his hand finding the back of her head. They stayed there, huddled on the marble floor of the shattered peace summit, while the galaxy reorganized itself around them. It wasn't a triumphant pose. It wasn't a hero shot. It was just two people, battered and bleeding, holding on to each other while the fires burned out. The aftermath was not clean. The Concordat did not vanish overnight. It fractured. Several systems seceded immediately. Senator Vance was arrested, but his lawyers were already spinning the defense. The Helix Dominion lost its exclusive contracts, its stock plummeting, but it was too big to fail completely. It retreated to the rim, wounded but alive, waiting for the next war. The rebels argued. Kess was gone, but new leaders emerged, fighting over territory and credit, freedom. Jonah learned was messy. It was loud and argumentative and inefficient, but it was real. 3 weeks later, the safe house was on a neutral moon, far from the trade routes. It was small, quiet, and smelled of rain. Jonah sat on the edge of the bed, watching Sierra. She stood by the window, the shutters drawn against the daylight. She was wearing her full mercenary gear, the heavy boots, the greaves, the chest plate. She had worn it since they arrived, a habit hard to break. Armor was safe. Armor was defined. She turned to him. The silence in the room was heavy, but not oppressive. It was the silence of a question waiting to be asked. She reached for the clasp of her chest plate, slowly, deliberately. She undid the latch. The heavy metal slid off, hitting the floor with a thud. She unbuckled the greaves, then the gauntlets. She stood in her mesh undersuit, then reached for the zipper at the back. She peeled it down, stepping out of the last layer of her old life. She stood before him, bare. Her skin was a tapestry of scars and light. The bioluminescence was soft, a warm, steady gold that pulsed in time with her breathing. She didn't try to hide the interface ports on her neck. She didn't try to hide the jagged line where the kill switch had been. She looked at Jonah. A flush of violet rose on her cheeks, not from shame, but from a sudden, overwhelming shyness. She smiled. It was a small, private thing. "Don't look human," she murmured. The old command now a soft invitation. Jonah smiled back. He didn't stand up. He didn't rush. He just sat there, witnessing her. "Only if you ask me to," he answered. She didn't ask. She crossed the room, the distance between them closing not with the speed of a soldier, but with the grace of a woman coming home. The door stayed closed. The world outside was still loud, still messy, still dangerous. But inside, in the quiet light of the room, they had built something honest. And for the first time in 100 years of manufactured stories, it was enough.